Winnsboro Emporium is going to be closing its doors forever anywhere between this weekend and my lease running out.
When is it? When does it run out?
Runs out the middle of next year.
Next what?
The middle of next year.
Year.
I'm out of cash reserves, so if I don't make enough money to pay my bills, then I'm going to have to close. So I'm going to go month to month.
So where do you suggest we meet if you close?
Well, we'll worry about that. You know, maybe the art center. If enough people take advantage of my sales, and like I said, everything the store owns is on sale between 25 and 75%. That includes select pieces of art that the shop owns, and almost all my used books, some of my new books that I don't own, like your book, are at list. I'm not reducing those prices. The gift items, several of the gift items I'm selling at cost. So hopefully, if I generate enough business, I'll stay open as long as I can. Okay, but right now, whenever I post stuff to Facebook about my sales, people like my post, but they don't act on it. So they can like it all they want. It's not going to help me at all. Okay, they got to come and buy stuff. Okay, and once the good stuff is gone, I'm not replenishing it. So that's just the way it is. There's still a lot of good stuff left, but once it sells, it's gone, and that's the end of it. I'm not going to replenish any of it. So I hope more people come in and buy children's books, young adult books, books for adults, paperbacks, hardbacks, first editions, they're all on sale. And so let's hope I get enough business to support the shop. Right now I'm getting 2 or 3 people a day coming into the shop, so that's not enough.
It's not good.
Anyway, time to start reading some poetry. I've been reading out of the Ballads of the Great West by Austin and Alta Fife, which Joe Dan has a copy of, and which I keep reading from until someone buys it. You can get it for $7.50. It normally is $15. It's was published at $7.95. Oh, that was the pre-publication price until September 27th. Otherwise, it was $10 when it came out. Its first edition came out in 1970.
19 what?
70 is when it came out.
It's been I got that back when it first came out. I've forgotten whether is this the one where they go reprint some of the Jack Thorpe poems.
Well, they might. I haven't been.
I mean, there was an early book of Western poetry put out. I think his name was Jack Thorpe, and it predates the Lomax stuff. And I think it's that book or another one reprints that as well as some other stuff. I think this may not be the one, but
Well, I don't know. It doesn't have.
there was around that same time several books came out on that topic.
Anyway, we're in part 1. I'm just reading them in order. Part 1 is the physical and human environment of the West. And we're up to Alaska or hell of the Yukon. And there is no preface of this thing, and it runs 2 pages.
No introduction or anything?
No introduction to this thing. It says, anyway, Alaska or hell of the Yukon. The devil in hell, we are told, was chained thousands of years. He there remained. He did not complain, nor did he groan, but determined to have a hell of his own, where he could torment the souls of men without being chained in a solitary pen. So he asked the Lord if he had any land in a colder clime than a poor soul could stand. The Lord said yes, but it's not much use. It's cold Alaska, and it is cold as the deuce. In fact, old boy, the place is bare. I don't think you could make a good hell there. Just see what this is.
Sorry.
That's all right. Come on in. Have a seat. We just started reading.
You started?
We just started to read, so you may sit any place.
You the first one?
I'm the first one.
Hey, Nat.
Never came here.
No.
Don't know where he is this month.
That's what I thought, where I thought he'd be.
Well, I did too, but there's a chair over there.
You may sit on this chair if you'd like. I've got chairs over there.
Maybe he'll be here late.
You can sit on the floor or any place.
Get up, mother.
The devil said he couldn't see why, for he sure knew his business and would like to try. So the bargain was made and the deed was given, and the devil quickly departed from heaven. We next see the devil far up in the north, examining Alaska to see what it is worth. From the top of McKinley, he looked at the truck and said, "If I get this for nothing, I still am stuck. But oh, it was fine to be out in the cold. The wind blew a gale and the devil grew bold. And there on the height of the mountain he planned to make of Alaska the home of the damned. A different place from the old-fashioned hell, where each soul burned in an awful hot cell. He used every means that a wise devil needed to make a good hell, and he sure succeeded. He filled the air with millions of gnats and spread the Yukon over the flats and set a line of volcanoes in Uonami's Pass and bred mosquitoes in the dungy grass and made 6 months' night, where it's 60 below, a howling wind and a pelting snow. 6 months' day with a spell now and then, too hot for the devil, too hot for his men, hungry dogs and wolves by the pack, that when they yell sends chills down your back. And when you mush o'er the barren expanse, the wind blows wicked holes in your pants. But of all the pests the imps could devise, the Yukon mosquitoes were the devil's pride. They're like the rattlesnake's bite or scorpion's sting, and they measure 6 inches from wing to wing. And the devil said when he fashioned these, each one will be worth 1,000,000 fleas. And over the mountains, valleys, and plains, where the dew falls heavy and sometimes rains, he grew a few flowers and berries just for a bluff, for the devil sure knew how to peddle his stuff. To show how well he knew his game, the devil next salted his new hell claim, put gold nuggets in some of his streams to lure men on in their hopes and dreams. He hid them deep in the glacial ice, like a reformed city hides its vice. He bid Dame Rumor to spread the news to all the world and its holy crews, that there was gold in heaps and piles, in all the colors and all the styles. He grinned, a satisfied grin, and said, "Now watch the fools rush in. They will fight for gold and steal and slay, and in the end it's me they will pay. Oh, what a fine hell this that the devil owns. His trails are marked by frozen bones. The wild wind moans o'er plain, hill, and dell. It's a hell of a place. He has his hell. Now you know, should anyone ask, what kind of place is our own Alaska." read one more short one, and then I will read one or two out of this book, and then I'll pass the baton. This is the seventh one. It's called On the Frisco River. And this is a little introduction. Topography, vegetation, and animal life all act like so many drugs or malevolent spirits upon men who sense that resistance is futile. Sounds like a Borg. Our one and only encounter with this poem is a copy sent by N. Howard Jack Thorpe, I do mention Thorpe, to the New Mexico files of the WPA Writers Project in the Library of Congress. Okay. On the Frisco River. The snow clung cold to the northern slope. The Frisco coiled like a silver rope, and hot on the scrub and the cactus gray, the level rays of the March sun lay. From up the fire of a freighter's camp, unquenched by the chill of the valley damp, the sweet dense smoke of the juniper wood rose up like joss to the great God good. A bald-faced steer, sides lank and thin, looked up from the mesquite with a yellow grin, while on the arm of a stunted oak, a dingy buzzard the silence broke. For it's the land of frijoles and sin, where men ride fast and ponies are thin, yet all who tarry within this land are held there tight by an iron hand. Mañana, they say, they'll hit the trail that leads from cactus to where the mail comes in each day, and life throbs hard, the land of the movies and the playing card. But still they stay while life rolls by, and on the Frisco they'll surely die. There graves are deep neath boulders gray, to keep the roving coyotes at bay. Ballads of the Great West. All right, this is another wonderful book here. The collected poems of Robert Service.
Ah, yes. The Face on the Barroom Floor.
And he wrote a lot of books of poetry, including stuff on Alaska and stuff. Anyway, this was published in 1958. You can buy it for $4. Originally it was $8, and you can get it for $4. And it was published in 58. The copyright was in 1940. Originally it was published in 1907 was the original publication.
1907?
Yes, that was the original publication date.
So the copyright's aged out.
Yeah. Anyway, the book one is The Spell of the Yukon and Other Verses. That runs till here. Let's see. Book two is Ballads of the Chechako, Cheechako, which I'm assuming is an Indian tribe of some kind. Then Rhymes of a Rolling Stone, which doesn't have anything to do with the singing of Rolling Stone. This was before that. Anyway, I'm going to read something out of Rhymes from a Rolling Stone, which I've not read any of these before. This is called Barbed Wire Bill, and it's on page 208, so I'm going to go to 208 and read that. Before I read Barbed Wire Bill is long, I'll read something shorter. This is called The Skeptic. My father Christmas passed away when I was barely 7. At 21, alack a day, I lost my hope of heaven. Yet not in either lies the curse, the hell of its because. I don't know which loss hurt the worst, my God or Santa Claus. Let's see. this is about me. It's called The Quitter. When you give up
That's
your
about
business-
all of us,
you give up your
probably.
business, they're called a quitter, so I'm quitting my business.
Well, you're in company with Sears.
Yes, and except that they're gonna have much harder time getting rid of their junk than I'm gonna have to get rid of mine. This is The Quitter by Mr. Service here, Robert Service. When you're lost in the wild and you're scared as a child and death looks you bang in the eye and you're sore as a boil, it's according to Hoyle to cock your revolver and die. But the code of a man says, fight all you can, and self-dissolution is barred. In hunger and woe, oh, it's easy to blow. It's the hell served for breakfast that's hard. You're sick of the game. Well, now that's a shame. You're young and you're brave and you're bright. You've had a raw deal, I know, but don't squeal. Buck up, do your damnedest and fight. It's the plugging away that will win you the day. So don't be a piker, old pard. Just draw on your grit. It's so easy to quit. It's the keeping your chin up that's hard. It's easy to cry when you're beaten and die. It's easy to crawfish and crawl. But to fight and to fight when hope's out of sight, why, that's the best game of them all. And though you come out of each grueling bout all broken and beaten and scarred, just have one more try. It's dead easy to die. It's the keeping on living that's hard. Robert Service. Let's see, Doc,
Oh,
it's your turn.
all
'Cause I
right.
don't know if either of these two guys are going to read anything.
Everything great?
No? Okay,
Okay.
come over here and I'll swap you the standing up over the podium for the comfy chair.
All right, all right. I don't like that chair. Put you to sleep there.
Yeah, I know that. That's why I put it here, so I can take a nap every
Yeah,
once in a while.
That bell isn't anywhere near loud enough to wake you up though.
We do a prayer and share every first and third Tuesday, and one of the girls shared something that was very interesting, and so I want to share it with y'all. And then I have another poem I want to read out of the Random House Treasury of Best Loved Poems.
Oh, and the Random House, they know everything.
That's right. I got a $1 million check from one time. Wasn't
Did
it
you?
good though?
Did you?
Yeah.
This is called Heaven's Grocery Store. Okay. I was walking down life's highway a long time ago. One day I saw a sign that read Heaven's Grocery Store. As I got a little closer, the door came wide open. And when I came to myself, I was standing there inside. I saw a host of angels. They were standing everywhere. One handed me a basket and said, "My child, shop with care." Everything a Christian needed was in that grocery store, and all you couldn't carry, you could come back for more. First I got some patience. Love was in the same row. Further down was understanding. You need that wherever you go. I got a box or two of wisdom and a bag or two of faith. I just couldn't miss the Holy Ghost, for it was all over the place. I stopped to get some strength and courage to help me run the race. By then, my basket was getting full, but I remembered I needed some grace. I didn't forget salvation, for salvation that was free. So I tried to get enough of that to save both you and me. Then I started up the counter to pay my grocery bill, for I thought I'd had everything to do my master's will. As I went up to the aisle, I saw prayer, and I just had to put that in. For I knew when I stepped outside, I'd run right into sin. Peace and joy were all plentiful. They were on the last shelf. Song and praises were hanging near, so I just helped myself. Then I said to the angel, "Now, how much do I owe?" He just smiled and said, "Just take them everywhere you go." Again, I smiled at him and said, "How much do I owe?" Again, he smiled and said, "My child, Jesus paid your bill a long time ago." I like that.
Yeah.
And it was anonymous, so I don't know who wrote that.
Anonymous. Jesus wrote that.
We could put Joe Dad's name on that one if we wanted
That's
to.
right. Joe Anonymous.
Joe Anonymous.
Joe Anonymous wrote it.
Okay, now the Random House Treasury. Best love poems.
Well, it must be small poem. This is an awful small book.
It is. It's I remember. I remember. That's the way it starts. I remember.
Did anyone in
I
particular-
remember.
Anyone in particular write that?
Let me see who wrote that. Thomas Hood.
Thomas Hood. Okay.
Yeah, I think of Hood Barbells. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's related.
Not him? Is it related? So I remember the house where I was born. The little window where the sun came peeping in at noon, at morn, excuse me. I should be wearing my glasses, shouldn't I? But I got it. He never came a week too soon, nor brought too long a day, for now I often wish the night had borne my breath away. I remember the roses, red and white, the violets and the lily cups, those flowers made of light, the lilacs where the ropes built, and where my brother sat, the labbard on his birthday, the tree is living yet. I remember where I used to swing, with thought to the air must rush as fresh. To swallows on the wing, my spirit flew to feathers then. There, that was a heavy now. And summer pools could hardly, and the fever of my brow. I remember the fir trees dark and high. I used to think their slender tops were close against the sky. It was childish ignorance, but now to this little joy, to know I'm further off from heaven than when I was as a boy. The end.
Okay.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Red Neil.
Red things are blinking.
Okay.
Everything is blinking. Winking, blinking, and nodding.
I'll make a couple of announcements. The better offer that I mentioned a while ago that some of us have, or tomorrow night, is at Tennis Chapel, third Saturday, music night, and we're going to have, for the first time anywhere on stage other than when they've been practicing up here at the Arts Center. The Arts Center, Lindy Hearn has been teaching ukulele lessons up there for a few months now. And he's got several students there. And Brenda Morey is one of them. And she, I had been trying to get her to work something out so one or more of them could come out and play at Tenny Chapel at one of our events. And she finally worked it out to where some of them, I don't know how many, it's going to be more than one, probably two or three, maybe three or four, of the players are going to appear as a group for one set, which would be 3 songs. And I'm just calling, for lack of a better name, the ukulele players of the Winnsboro Center for the Arts. And then we have Greg Wyram, the Polish cowboy, who appeared last month as a guest for George Jordan and his set. He did a couple of songs that George would have normally done. And he was a big hit. And so we had a spot open at that time. We got him to come back on and do a full set tomorrow night. The Couriers, who used to be called the Couriers, Curry family, they're now called the Scroggy Bottom Blues Band. They'll be on. And Eddie Owen and his magnificent musicians will be on. George Jordan, the original Ten Chapel Troubadour, will be on. We think it'd be a really good program. So those of you who aren't going to see the Beatle Bluegrass Band, come out to Ten Chapel. That's free. You don't. Our tickets are free. You just have to walk in and say you're interested. I have one poem that I wrote myself. It's not really a poem. It's what I call a prose poem. But I remembered while we were while Doc and Conrad were reading, I remembered a poem in this. Some of you remember Edgar A. Guest. Conrad has read some of his poems here. I think I've read one or two over the years. Edgar Guest used to be known as kind of the common man's poet. You know, he was a little bit like Robert Metcalf, who was popular in the 40s and 50s. He was syndicated in a lot of the newspapers, and he wrote poems for the common person. They were not necessarily highly stylized or anything, you know, but they were about everyday things, and they struck a note with most people. Edgar Guest was well before Metcalf, and in fact Edgar Guest was long before my time. I think I was born while he was still alive, but just barely. But he had the same kind of reputation. And I remember when acquiring this book in a store much like the Winnsboro Emporium somewhere many years ago, a collection. The title of it is A Heap of Living. And that's the title of the lead poem in here. But the one I want to read is one that has always meant a lot to me. When I was growing up, my aunt who raised me, my mother's sister, when my mother died when I was 2, and I was raised by her sister and her husband. And she cooked she had a recipe, her own recipe. The recipe was called My Raisin Pie. And she only named it because I asked her to write it down. You know, it wasn't written down anywhere. She just knew how to make it. And one time I had sense enough to ask her to write the recipe down for me. And you know, and she died in the 80s, but her recipe lives on. And in the new Tennessee Chapel cookbook, which just came out this past week, I put this in there, you know, crediting her. Her name was Maud Tenney Cater. You know, she was my mother was Dolly Tenney, and her sister was Maud Tenney, and she married Kay Cater, so it became Maud Tenney Cater. But Edgar Guest wrote this great poem entitled Raisin Pie. And I've always loved it because when I was growing up, that was my favorite pie. And it is my favorite pie to this day, but nobody makes raisin pie anymore. I don't remember the last time I had a fresh made raisin pie by anyone. Okay, I'm going to read the poem, and then I'm going to wind up with one that I wrote. There's a heap of I'm sorry, I'm thinking of their lead poem. There's a heap of pent-up goodness in the yellow bantam corn, and I sort of like to linger around a berry patch at morn. Oh, the Lord has set our table with a stock of things to eat, and there's just enough of bitter in the blend to cut the sweet. But I run the whole list over, and it seems somehow that I find the keenest sort of pleasure in a chunk of raisin pie. There are pies that start the water circulating in the mouth. There are pies that wear the flavor of the warm and sunny South. Some with oriental spices spur the drowsy appetite, and just fill a fellow's being with a thrill, real delight. But for downright solid goodness that comes dripping from the sky, there's nothing quite the equal of a chunk of raisin pie. I'm admitting tastes are different. I'm not setting up myself as the judge and the final critic of the good things on the shelf. I'm just sort of paying tribute to a simple joy on earth, sort of feebly testifying to its lasting charm and worth. And I'll hold to this conclusion till it comes my time to die, that there's no dessert finer than a chunk of raisin pie. Amen, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. I just wish I could find one. I have the recipe. I'm going to have to cook it myself, and I have done so. I used to cook a little bit at one time, and I've made this pie myself. And it, even when I make it, it's a joy.
Before you read your poem, I just remembered another secret event that's going on this weekend.
Oh,
On Sunday afternoon, the Trails Country Treasure Award will be
That's
presented.
right. That's Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Will be presented at 2 o'clock, and I believe Jim Willis is
Jim Willis is the treasurer.
is the treasurer for this year, and that's another secret event that nobody knows about except Joe Dan.
Well, it was on the front page of the Winnsboro paper.
Well, I don't
this
get the
week.
Winnsboro paper. So.
you want no one to read it, put it on the front page of the
That's right.
Winnsboro News.
Maybe it didn't get on Facebook. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not on Facebook anymore, so I don't
No,
know.
I'm there, but seldom. So.
This is a poem. This is a prose poem. It's a lot more prose than poetry, but it has a certain lyricism to it. I wrote this on Father's Day in 2012, and like I mentioned a while ago, my mother died when I was 2. My father died a year and a half later, year and 6 months later, so I was raised by my mother's sister and her husband. And I have this vague memory of my mother. You know, I remember what she looked like. It's just like one picture in my mind that I remember while she was alive. Now I have much more vivid memories of my dad. I was 3.5 when he died, so I remember what his voice sounded like, you know, as well as what he looked like, you know. And he had a sense of an interesting sense of humor and all that. So my recollections of my dad is considerably more vivid and complete than with my mother. So on Father's Day in 2012, I decided to kind of pay a tribute to him. His name was Dan Boyd, and he was my father, but I have only hazy memories of him in the flesh. After all, I was only 3.5 years of age when he died, surviving his wife, Dolly Tenny Boyd, my mother, by about 18 months. Both died in the mid-1930s. That opposites often attract might explain the unlikely meeting, romance, and eventual marriage of Dolly and Dan, both natives of Wood County, Texas, who spent most of their brief adult lives struggling with the dark strata of emotional and economic tumult that we now regard as a 3-word footnote to history, the Great Depression. That they would marry and have 3 children, Nelda, Jodan, and Tommy, before both died young in 1936 and 1937. Dolly, born June 1, 1913, to Ambrose and Elizabeth Tenney, was destined to be the beauty and the baby of a large farming family with strong roots in the Old South, where her Alabama ancestors had sided with both the Union and the Confederacy. Her parents believed in hard work, religion, education, sobriety, neighborliness. She would become the family princess, carefully shielded from opposing viewpoints, and her beauty would assure a choice of marriage partners from worthy men who shared both her sheltered social life and her high aspirations. By the time Dolly was 15, she had finished 8th grade at Vernon Country School in Wood County, had been baptized at Tenney Chapel Methodist Church, which had been founded by a land grant from her father, and she was on track to become a 1932 graduate, from first in her family to do so, from high school in Winnsboro, a 3-mile walk from her farm to town. There, before her graduation, she was a serious student, enjoying home economics, playing on the girls' basketball team. At the old Tenney home place where Dolly was born, raised, played the organ, and demonstrated her dancing skills, she sometimes organized Sunday evening social events, such as ice cream suppers, recalls Helen Tenney Miller, one of Dolly's nieces, who was also a childhood playmate of Dolly's. No formal invitation for such events at all. News was passed by word of mouth. Anyone in the community who heard about a social was welcome to the team. That would have included Dangerous Dan Boyd, a rough and rowdy man's man, widely regarded as a bit reckless, willing to take a drink, having a short fuse, unafraid to defend honor in a fist fight, and a real charmer with an effusive sense of humor and very likely captured Dolly's heart the moment their eyes met. He also became a husband and a father who loved his wife and children, according to his sister, my Aunt Mary Boyd, but she was born Boyd and married Cliff Poe, who told me a lot about him after I moved back to Wood County in 1997. From Aunt Mary and another aunt, Stella Boyd Weems, I learned of the Native American Cherokee history on my dad's side of the family. To help make ends meet during the Depression, Dan also joined the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCCs, a new creation of FDR from which he obtained permission to leave a Colorado CCC camp during February 1936 to be with Dolly in her final hours of life. So on this Father's Day, 2012, and since then 13, 14, 15, 16, and now 17, I salute you, Dangerous Dan Boyd, the father I barely knew, who nevertheless loved me and my brother Tommy. For this, I will always be grateful.
What was the Civilian Conservation Corps? Was it?
It was a make-work program similar to the WPA and that sort of thing, except it was run like an army. In fact, they wore army uniforms. They were issued uniforms. But they did work in parks, a whole lot like WPA in terms of what they did.
So it had one of its purposes might have been conservation.
Yeah, exactly. That's how he justified it. That's how FDR, got Congress to.
Well, I mean, that's way back there. I mean, I don't know when conservation started, but in the 30s, that's pretty far back.
Yeah. Well, I think you could say Teddy Roosevelt started the big conservation movement in this country, but FDR kind of publicized it and made it a big thing. Really a huge government. He fought with the Supreme Court back and forth. They called some of his things unconstitutional and put them out of business and all that. But he gave work to a lot of people. And like Dan took that job because, like Kate, my Aunt Maud's husband, the ones who raised me after my mother and father died, I one time asked Kay what it was like in the Depression, because he was the same age as Dan, or approximately the same age, within a year or two, and they knew each other really well. And I said, what was it, I hear people talk about how bad it was, no money, little money, no work, and this kind of thing. Just how bad was it? Give me an example, And he said, well, I remember one time when some of us heard about a job, one job, and it was a 10-mile walk from where we lived, one way, and it paid $0.25 a day, and all of us wanted it. That's how bad it was. But a quarter would buy a lot,
Yeah, it was a different time.
Yeah.
But still, it wasn't. Couldn't have been much.
No. And the other point you made, I would say some of Dan's, Dan died, as I said, a year and a half after Dolly died, and but that uniform that he had been issued by the CCC, I mean, it was just regular, out of the Army quartermaster. It wasn't special CCC stuff. It was just Army stuff. And I remember there was one of those big, rucksacks or whatever, the big thing you put over your shoulder, and it was you carried stuff in it, khaki Army colored and all that. That was still around when I was a boy, and Kay used it when he would go hunting. He would put his birds, squirrel or whatever in there. And he had one of those big field jackets, Army field jackets, and Kay wore that for years, when I was a young boy. So all that uniform stuff that he was issued survived for a long, and was used for a long time. And you know, and the way the CCC operated was most of that money that and you got, it was basically soldiers' pay, and you know, not very much in a month, but something like 75% or more of it was sent home to your folks. You didn't get it. The civilian. Oh, there's a book on the Civilian Conservation Corps called The Soil Soldiers. They did a lot of work, you know, conserving soils as well as trees, forests. And,
Now, this was after the Great Depression. Well,
no, it was during the Great Depression.
well, okay, there was the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, that happened during the Depression. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, they well, like, it's where you put terraces in the ground. You
What in the ground?
terraces.
Oh, terraces. Yeah.
I mean, there's a term for it, but I mean that came about from the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that the Civilian Conservation Corps, or whatever the name was,
That's it.
came about possibly from the Dust Bowl too.
I suppose there was a connection. Yeah.
Well, they used to have a black CCC here, right?
Right. Yeah. And what's his name? Can't remember his name now. There's a guy that was in that lived here. Used to come to Tenney Chapel when the Henson Chapel wasn't having service. He'd come to Tenney Chapel, and Bill Jones interviewed him a lot for some of his stories on the CCC. Because CCC camp here, apparently we didn't have a white camp here. We had a black one, and Dan was assigned to one in Colorado most of his time.
Well, when you grew up, was the black population more here in Winnsboro? I mean,
I don't know, probably less.
less?
I would think so. Yeah. I think you know, I didn't see very many black people when I was
A
growing
lot
up.
of them were in northern Upshur County.
Yeah.
I think they probably brought a lot of them in for the CCC, you know, because they had barracks and everything. They
Yeah.
lived pretty close
Yeah,
to
they
black
stayed in
military
barracks.
style.
Yeah.
And I know my dad was in the CCCs, and he went to 2 or 3 different locations during his time period.
Yeah.
Jim Crow was alive and well, too.
Say again?
Jim Crow was
Oh,
alive
well,
and
sure.
well, too.
Yeah. Well, everything was segregated. Even the Army during World War II was segregated. You know, it didn't happen until much later. The real desegregation. There was something else you mentioned that sparked or something in my mind. I thought the thing I thought was really good was that they sent about the huge big part of the money home to the family. So the guy got maybe 25%, you know, a fourth of the money.
He didn't need any money.
That's right. 'Cause, you know, you had your room and board taken care of and all that.
No place to spend it either.
That's right. But I've got a few pictures that survived that was made while Dan was at the CCC working working on projects. A couple of those pictures survived, and I'm really glad to have those. You know, because you can see him in that uniform. You know, he looks like a soldier. But the
This was prior to World War II, right?
yeah, prior to World War II.
Do
Yeah.
you think, well, I mean, people that served in the CCC got a little acknowledgement going into World War II if they went into the service?
I don't know. That's a good point. I'm gonna look into that. My dad didn't live to
Tell you.
be a part of that, but I bet
You want to continue
a lot of people did.
for the remainder of this while I talk to my...
So anyway, I'll wind up with our final paragraph from How to Read a Poem and Fall in Love with Poetry by Edward Hirsch. It seems to me that Neruda's poem, which we finished reading last month, it seems to me that Neruda's poem has what Garcia Lorca called, I'm going to have to guess at the pronunciation of this, duende, D-U-E-N-D-E. If somebody wants to Google that word, do so and tell us what it means. The duende was traditionally an Andalusian trickster figure. Well, okay, now we know what it is. Much like the Yiddish dabuk, but Lorca used it as a name for creative possession for inspiration in the presence of death, for that scorched spirit that sometimes takes over in moments of artistic creation. It is an irrational power, something like a demonic religious enthusiasm. All that has black sounds, let me rephrase that, or re-emphasize it. All that has black sounds has duende, Lorca says in Play and Theory of the Duende. And Neruda's poem is filled with such black sounds. It is a magnet for them. This lucid dream has a wild, surreal associativeness, but it also has a relentless logic of its own. The spiritual problem is death, only death, a death that is everywhere. The technical problem, which is an index to the spiritual one, is how to write about it. That is, how to dramatize a ubiquitous presence. Who somebody said a while ago, the ubiquitous cat. Is that you, Mike?
Ever present.
An omnivorous something which manifests itself as an absence, as nothingness. The poet of Whitmanesque ambitions, Walt Whitman, must find a way to present something that has as its sole purpose taking things away. Consequently, in Nothing But Death, Neruda was forced herself, to invent an imaginative structure and develop an imaginistic strategy for dramatizing and incarnating what he sees as the quintessence of death itself. The end of the paragraph. Well, that was interesting. One of the deeper paragraphs.